religious beliefs and a large number of followers. While this is also true in other parts of Africa, for example, the specific role and influence of religious institutions and actors here is different and worth exploring. Religions in East Africa and the Horn have a track record as forces for social development, peace building and mediation on national, regional and local level. But as we have heard before from Father Apollinaire, and as everywhere in the world and at any given time in history, religions also possess the intrinsic and systemic power to create or fuel conflicts. We here at IRDIS push for inclusive and safe interreligious dialogue as a tool for peace. This idea of peace is a comprehensive one, not just the absence of violence, but we're talking about equal participation and representation, with fundamental freedoms for everyone, with effective, transparent institutions, and with secure and sufficient livelihoods, regardless of each individual's background. All these things are in line with the fundamental truth found in all religions, the Golden Rule. Those who have been at IRDIS activities know that my personal favorite iteration of this rule is found in the Jewish tradition. In the sacred scripture of the Talmud, it is spelled out. What is wrong to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the whole book, while the rest is the commentary thereof. Go and learn it. Very harsh, very straightforward. That's the core of what we do. So why do religions often struggle with those simple instructions when it comes to politics and elections? Why do they have an ambivalent role in societies and politics against their most sacred principles? How can we have towering religious figures of integrity, love, and resistance to violence and corruption in all the countries of the region, whilst at the same time institutions stay silent or are even complicit of marginalization, injustice, or violence in societies? What are the options religions actually have in these times to work for free, fair, and peaceful elections? And more provocative, do religions build more bridges than they actually burn? And lastly, how can religions be effective bridge builders across the fault lines of the societies in East Africa and the Horn? To dig deeper and untangle these different aspects, we here at IRDIS and our partners from the Institute for Social Transformation have formulated 4 areas of specific interest to be discussed over the next 2 days. To not repeat the program that you have all received, we will talk about history in the beginning, ethnicity and polarization, empowerment and marginalization, and lastly about corruption. All those topics will be presented by experts from the region through a religious lens, hopefully with a balanced view of the role of religions in these aspects. The role that they have played, that they are playing now, and they could play in the future to benefit East Africa and the Horn. We are all very well aware of how controversial any critical discussion of this is in this region currently. We have felt it in the preparation to this conference. It is a topic that makes voices quiet. It is a topic that makes people afraid. It is a topic that gets activists and researchers in trouble so that they have to leave their countries. And for what it's worth, it's not the religious aspects that are bringing about difficulties. The mere mentioning of elections as a discussion topic rings the alarm, to such a degree that any social media posts about this conference, which aims at enlightenment, research, and dialogue, could not be widely spread due to the multinational companies' filters. Religious activists are strong voices to keep politics accountable, and we want to continue to showcase them, to fulfill their prophetic power for the common good. We are very proud of convening you for the next 2 days to discuss, regardless of any difficulties and without any filters, about the role of religion and of all religions in electoral processes in Africa, in East Africa and the Horn. I'm therefore delighted to hand over to the moderator of the first session on the historical role of religions in election processes, to my esteemed colleague Rita Mazzocchi from the Institute for Social Transformation. Rita is a PhD researcher here in Tangaza and a seasoned expert in the region, working with UNDP and civil society organizations. So Rita, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Matthias, for your introduction, and also thank you also to our Vice Chancellor for his prayers and direction. The panelists are already here. The first theme of this morning is the historical role of religions in election processes. This is looking at the commitment of religious leaders in the world that has found a variety of expressions in the course of humanity. So the holy books of most religions give directions on elections and elected leaders. And then we also know that religious traditions expect elected leaders to care for marginalized people and observe an equal society. In other words, to serve the people. When elected leaders do not observe these principles, they are breaking fundamental laws that put them in office. But really, what does it all mean? Religions hold political authority with the ambition to fulfill a divine mission. But does it? Religious leaders, women, minorities, men, can propagate a transformative message to the political establishment as it conducts its affairs. But also it needs to work cautiously, as Bishop Gitari would say, collaborate, but keep a critical distance in all engagements. It is my pleasure. We have three panelists this morning. The first one is Dr. Reginald Nalugala. Our second panelist is George Ohio, and our third panelist, Rosalind Odede. What I'd like to do is introduce you, each one of them, and give you a brief bio just before they speak. So Dr. Reginald Modlin is a postgraduate tutor at Tangaza University College. He teaches a PhD Masters in Social Transformation, and the key courses are Governance Principles, Politics and Democracy in Africa, Anti-Radicalization Measures and Leadership in Africa, with a focus in critiquing the development discourses in Africa. He is one of the organizers of the Global Biannual Fratelli Tutti Conference together with ERDIS, Uma University, Harmony Institute, and GMU in California, and Susan Kalinja University, Indonesia. Because global challenges require global partnership of actors to find solutions. Dr. Reginald, would you like to start, please?
So thank you very much, Rita, for the introduction. So our topic for this session is going to look at the historical role of religion on electoral processes. So what I've tried to do is, first of all, enter into the discourse of the theoretical framing of this particular question to help us enter into the discussion. And my framing is to help us create a global overview of religion, electoral processes, and then the historical role of religion in the elections. So in this session, I'm very happy to work with my panelists, Jojo Yeho and Rosalind Odede. So I will start with the theoretical framing, and George will go into some cases of examples from East Africa, and especially in Kenya. So what is important for me is to ask the question, why elections? Elections is a process where candidates who are standing for elections need to show the achievements to prove that they're capable persons who can contribute to the social transformation of their society. Therefore, the vote is a process through which the country stays on path of democracy and doesn't turn into anarchy. So through elections, we replenish, we renew society. Through election, the citizens of the state choose a government that will work toward the welfare and development of the country. And so to help us enter into this discussion, we can ask these questions. Does election by itself influence, or do the practitioners of religion be the ones that determine the processes? Which theoretical framing can we derive from these questions? So I've tried to create some definition to help us discuss later, and this all relate to the process of elections in Africa and especially in Kenya. We're going to look at religion as a set of beliefs, practices, rituals, and manipulation of the supernatural, the people who tend to manipulate the supernatural. We're going to look at religion as the sacred and the profane. And some of the key scholars that have contributed to this, especially in Kenya, is Jomo Kenyatta, facing Mount Kenya. Religion as symbols. These are churches, crosses, mosques with the minarets or the crescent, temples. Some religions have stones, have mountains, have rivers, have totems. Totems, for example, snakes, lion, the hare, giraffe, determine who is elected into office. For example, in Africa, we know if your ethnic symbol is a lion or your clan symbol is a lion, you're most likely to be elected into office than the person whose symbol is maybe the hare. So why do this come about? The influence of religion. We're looking at religion as reality of the sacred, the concept of hierophany, connecting symbols with the deity, like Mircea Eliade brings out this discussion very clearly. That when you go for prayers, you are offering prayers thinking about the supernatural. When you go, if you're a Christian and you go for mass, the mass is not the end. There's a symbolic nature connecting you with Jesus somewhere in the divine. Religion as an individual experience of the sacred and negatively used for negative gains. So there could be three aspects of definition that are very important that help us to enter to this discussion. And the second part that I really like is the religion as functional and substantive. And here is where now we are contrasting religion requires belief in God or gods or the supernatural. To contrast with the functions of religion, for example, defines religion by the social and the psychological functions of it, performance of the individual society. And so in the substantive theory of religion, we're trying to understand, the content. How do we put together this content and who puts together this content? Then in the function, we are looking at beliefs, systems, the way people get together to organize themselves. Sometimes it's very subjective assumptions about the role of religion. Roles and functions should be discovered through empirical investigation and ascribed beforehand. Sometimes almost any movement with a committed group of followers could classify as a religion. And I was very interested to learn also that atheists can actually form their own religion because they have a certain beliefs that deny that God doesn't exist or believe that the supernatural doesn't exist, but coming together they actually form their own religion. And this is very important for us. And then lastly, for the definition, is to look at what Pope Francis says. Religion gives hope to humanity. Yes, challenges exist to be overcome. Let us be realists, but without losing our joy of boldness and our hope-filled commitment. This is also what Maria Chippermans brings out in her book, The Social Analysis of the 21st Century, Our Sacred Calling to the World. And in the context of Kenya, I quote Bishop Rotich, who has used Ezekiel 37, 15 to 28 to bring together warring groups. So religion as a reconciler of different groups. And Bishop Rotich uses this quote to remind us of the election of 2017, where the two groups had hardliner stance, they did not want to unite. And so he was using this Ezekiel's passage to bring the two groups together. And Ezekiel is instructed to inscribe two sticks, one for Judah and one for Joseph, to unite them, because this is God's intention for nations to be united. And when the two sticks are together, they are stronger than when they are split. So when we are talking about the theoretical framing of religion in elections, we want to understand religion as predestination from the traditionalist theory of the role of religion, functionalists, modernists, and transformation. So in the predestination and election processes, here we're looking at Christian theology and Islamic theology, where we invoke the deity to be the determining factor in what we do. We speak out of those who cannot speak and defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Election within the Bible is the notion that God favors some individuals who are God's chosen people. And these are very important because we're going to learn that some communities will say we are the chosen people, and so nobody else can take over our position in terms of election. And we're going to see how different faiths play a role in determining who becomes the leader. For you are a people, a holy people of the Lord your God. It is you, the Lord has chosen out of all the peoples of earth to be his people, his treasured possession. Predestination is a crucial problem, not only in Christianity, but in Islam and others. The question of predestination in Islamic theory is whether man has power to act or free will to choose his action. If he has free will, it means that God's omnipotence is challenged. The traditionalists brings in the customary hereditary theory on religion. Leadership is tied to traditions or customs on who should be the leader. Then election is just to affirm or please outsiders on the required democracy to elect a leader. And this is very important because in certain traditions, if my family belongs to a totem of the lion and we are seen as the most powerful, we shall perpetually be in power. It does not matter whether I'm weak or strong, perpetually in power. Yet in a democratic society, we're looking for the best leader who can deliver services to the people. So in the traditional perspective, leadership can be hereditary. The traditionalists would adjust the election of the leader to fulfill requirements of the elections. They will argue things have always been this way. So in certain traditions where age sets have been very dominant, especially in communities like where the Mwangi and Maina age sets transfer power to the next, or the changing over age sets among pastoralist communities. One age set will be in power for 14 years, another one for 9 years. Now, in a modern democracy, if I'm going to be elected only for 5 years, I say, no, I'm letting down my ethnic group. Therefore, I must go for the required 9 years. So I might cause chaos just to be in power for another 9 years. So the traditionalists and the modern type of democrats tend to contradict each other. In the traditionalists or the customary hereditary approach to elections, there is hero worship with supernatural powers. This one we see. In fact, if you watch movies by the Vikings and all that, you see that the leader has supernatural powers or invokes supernatural powers to be in power. So traditionalists want proof of leadership. Among hunters, the best of them is elected, the one who has the power to shoot down an animal with a bow and arrow. The one who is the expert will become the leader. So a daughter or son of such a setting cannot fail in an election process. The functionalist theory underlying religion look at religion as a conservative force, that this is positive function for society and for individuals. Religion helps to create social order and maintain the value of consensus. But what is also interesting here is that when religion then plays an active role in polity, they say, keep your distance. We don't want religion to interfere with the elections. But when there are chaos, they're invoking religious leaders to unite them. So religion becomes a function to meet certain needs. And to reinforce social unity and stability, serving as an agent of social control of behavior, promoting physical and psychological well-being, and motivating people to work for positive social change. The interrelatedness in such a culture does not allow change from the status quo. Things have always happened like this. Who are you to tell us to change? Then postmodernist theory is kind of denying that religion is not good for society because it divides. But therefore, religion no longer matters. It is outdated and society does not need it. The implication, we do not need an election process that embraces religion to elect leaders. And here you'll find people who have come in from the neo-classical school who say that when you bring in religion, then you are influencing the vote. Because then people who come from the predestination that leadership is inherited from God will influence the election. So postmodernists do not want to see religion play a role in elections. Then the last one that I have here is the transformative approach to religion. Transformation requires knowing the problem. What is the problem? Our democracy is not working. Then what do we need to do to introduce change? What kind of change? That we hold elections every periodic time to replenish our leadership, bring in leaders that are going to work for the common good of society, by allowing local ownership in the process of achieving transformation. What is transformation in religion? Religious transformation involves a change or complex series of changes that enable movement from one state of being to the other, from a state of anarchy, chaos, torture, murder, massacre, to a state where people now come together to negotiate in the center to arrive at certain agreed requirements to develop your society. So transformation does not put away religion, but understands whether religion contributes to election of ethical leaders, and the electorate are well educated to know their worthy role in society. They are not gullible to bribery to vote. Religion is an intrinsic value, inherent and moral. As an instrument for all, monetary groups to find voice among dominance of majority. If religion is embraced by people, because religion cannot exist in isolation, they are people, then you must contribute to the intrinsic value, humanity, love, sharing, education, hospitals, promoting peace, sharing the common good, allowing people to thrive, to invest, rule of law. Then this kind of people can bring about harmony in society. So for the theoretical understanding of religion, help us to enter deeper into the discussion that religion has a role to play in the electoral process, in elections of any society, and that religion, if practiced well by individuals, can actually bring about the desired transformation. Now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Jojo Eho, for the next part.
Just before you do that, maybe I would like to introduce George Ohio. Dr. Reginald, thank you very much for that presentation and the succinct methodology of it. So I think the key takeaway message from that is that if the religion is to play a role, it has to really contribute to humanity, love, sharing, the common good, the rule of law, and the ethics of being leaders. Dear colleagues and friends, our next speaker is my fellow student, George Amenya Ohio, who is a retired colonel from the Kenyan Army with a background in logistics. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Management and Master's in Public and Nonprofit Administration from Metropolitan State University of Minnesota, an Executive MBA from Bradford, UK. George is currently a PhD finalist in social transformation with a focus on governance at Tangaza University College. He consults on social sector service delivery strategies independently and on strategic planning and management at Professional Training Consultants in Nairobi. He's a mentor with Commonwealth Women's Mentorship Program for Young Women. He's an active community organizer who have started grassroots CBOs, that is, civil society organizations, to deliver inclusive social sector services with entrepreneurship development that created hay fodder production and the dairy value chain in Seaya County. Please welcome George. Thank you.
Good morning, fellow panelists and colleagues. All protocols observed. My part is to make a reflection on the Kenyan situation. I will start with the relationship between religion and the politics in Kenya. The religion and politics guide social values of the society to direct morals and ethics of the people. Religion and politics are mutually exclusive. However, we are the same people in the society that advocate for religion and for politics. Religion can be an instrument of governance. We do have religious states like the Islamic Republic of Sudan. Somalia is struggling whether to be an Islamic state. In Kenya, the Constitution provides for the rights and freedoms of citizens in terms of religion, according to Articles 27(4) on rights and Article 32(3) on freedom. The Constitution separates church and state and guards its citizens against religious discrimination and unwelcome religious pressure. This one could be traced back to 1960s when the late Bishop Okulu wrote a book on the state and church. The second part I want to talk about is the prophetic role of religion in an electoral process. Every system of beliefs gives a place to believe in prophets and within its own structures. From Adam to Muhammad, prophets were each just a prophet and nothing more. And prophetic role of religion is to announce the truth to the power, using a faith-based critical message on violating the marginalized rights. And this can be drawn from the book of Jeremiah 1:10, which is to root out, pull down, destroy, build, and plant. It implies that the religious leaders have got the right to tell the state or the political powers that what they are doing is not right and is going to harm the society. They pull them down and they make sure that those unwarranted activities and actions or policies are not advanced. Therefore, they have to rebuild and plant the seed of accord that brings everybody together and accepts the reality of the situation. Now, religious leaders tend to jump in bandwagon of powers for the purpose of their personal gain. Why? They want to avoid persecution, or they want other social and even economic gains. And this led to Bishop Gitare's comment that collaborate but keep critical distance as you work with the political. And that was his message to the clerics. Key players in this role of prophetic in Kenya, we had late Cardinal Otunga, the Catholic. Then we had Bishop Okulu, we had Bishop Gitare, Bishop Wanwanzeki, and Bishop Korir. These men of cloth stood out for their ability to tell the powers when things were not working right. And they did not miss their words. However, with time, people like Wanwanzeki and Korir fell to the power because they got some goodies which they should not have actually been able to, accept. And Bishop Wanzeki, when he was in Nakuru, was very strong. When he moved to Nairobi, he changed, totally changed. And that became a real challenge. And we have also example of, in the last election, Cardinal Njue. He flip-flopped. That was not very good. Now, the church and the society. The church and society are the custodians of social values and justice. The church and the state or the society, we all have social values from the family. When a child is born, raised in the family, they belong to the society. The next step they go is to the church. The church also imparts certain values on how they need to behave, how they need to treat each other, because the role of the church is to inform and form the character of the individual. And the same as the society, they inform and form the character of the person, how they are supposed to coexist with each other in that society. Now, church is a gathering of worshipers and believers. And this is ecumenism. They serve spiritual needs of the people. Faith cannot be ignored in Kenya politics because 97% of Kenyans are deemed to be religious. And therefore, they form the ground of society where the behavior and the perception of politics becomes very strong. So we would like to see that every time we have political process or electoral process, the church needs to be very, very strong to keep everybody upright. However, ethnicity, tribalism, and cultures become also a factor, an issue within both the church and the society. There's social economic influence. And we have seen in Kenya, the politicians are always going to churches with goodies. There are some churches where they become conduits of corruption. Monies are brought in Kenya through the churches. It gets withdrawn. And it's not a surprise that some of those politicians or political leaders using the churches, they bring in the money from overseas. They go to the bank and withdraw like 100 million shillings in one batch. It's not fair. The system knows, but they do nothing about it. The other side is tribalism in the church becomes an issue. They are not looking at the common good of the entire Kenyan society. Some of the clerical leaders, they prefer to deal with their own kins and kids. So they end up setting them up in a way that when they are working, every information, every resource is channeled through these individuals. It's unbelievable. Some of the clerics with the meager sources of income from the churches, they have palatial homes. Is that really a sign of stewardship that is desired? How can he or such a person be able to stand up to the truth, the powers that be? It is not feasible, because they feel that they have their own rights, but that is not what their role is as part of religious system. Now, the clergy influence on the political topic, they influence the political topics and congregation attitudes. We have the churches as a platform where you have a captive audience. Because once everybody goes into the church or the mosque, it is all dead silent. It's only the voice from the pulpit. But are we always getting the right messages from the clerics? We need to rethink about what we get from the clerics is not always right, and we need to make a choice whether what we get from them is good enough. We have a church and politicians alliance. All of them, the politicians go to the churches. They want to look good. They have self-pride. The feeling that the church is our sense of belonging. What is the purpose of that? They feel as part of the church, they can be able to use the pulpit to influence the congregants. And it is been a practice for some time that in the middle of a service, a politician is called to the pulpit. It is not right. We should allow this church service process to continue from the beginning to the end without disruption to bring in the political interests. The church and the society is also driven by materialism today. Most of the churches are driven by material. And that's why we get even people of clothes who are supposed to have taken the vows of poverty, living like millionaires or billionaires, palatial homes. And you ask, how many times do they ever go to those homes? And part of this, the church has become a fundraising business and a conduit for illicit money. Many times we've gotten this, we call for fundraising, and money comes in, it is never used in the church, it goes elsewhere. At the same time, some of the clerics have gone into the habit of, once they got the money from wherever, they are given a certain percentage, the bulk of the money goes back. That is totally unfair. At the same time, we have some of the clerics have moved from pulpit to the parliament. The question is, they had a lot of expectations. They thought they knew how to get things right. But when they get into parliament, they get swallowed by that big system and they lose their voices. They just become part of the system. That is not good. So if you want to remain as a cleric, please hold into the being a cleric, steer the society against the political ills from the pulpit. And we also have politics. This part needs to be telling us about inequality, hate, social sector services, ethics, morality, populism, and competition. Now, do we all get this? Most of the clerics are going into that for popularism. They want to be seen to be popular. They know, yet after their sermons, they do exactly opposite of what they are talking about. They want not to remain equal to everybody. They don't want to see the hate, because some of the clerics actually advocate the hate along ethnicity or tribalism. So they keep people apart, and therefore they are not living to their moral and ethical values that the society expects out of them. Thank you very much. I hope I've been able to share a bit of that information that is important towards this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Just before we go to the next speaker, maybe I would like to just highlight some things that stood out for me. So what we have here is George explains to us, that the church has a moral obligation to speak the truth. However, there can be also problems. So, for example, he highlighted that sometimes, so the church has got a prophetic role to speak truth to power. However, we can see also that it is not perfect and that there are problems that come up. He highlighted a number of issues of things related to ethnicity and tribalism. The connection between church and power, which becomes really cozy and maybe potentially is corrupt. The materialism that has maybe impacted some of our church leaders. And the potential also, again, linking this to corruption of the church becoming a conduit for illicit money or money transfers. And even finally, but not least, for hate speech or hate related issues. So with your indulgence, we will now go to our third speaker, which is Roslyn Odede. Roslyn Odede is the chairperson of the Kenyan National Commission of Human Rights. She's an advocate at the High Court of Kenya, a certified mediator, an arbitrator, and a social and environmental impact auditor and assessor. She previously served as the vice chairperson of the Judges, Magistrates, and a Vetting Board, and is a nationally recognized expert in gender, governance, policy, and human rights. She holds a Master's of Laws degree awarded by the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa, and has been a litigator in private practice for over 30 years. Roslyn was also specially recognized by the East African Law Society for distinguished legal practice and service. Roslyn has held several leadership positions in several professional societies, including the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, East Africa Law Society, and the Law Society of Kenya and FIDA Kenya. Roslyn, you're welcome. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Rita, for that introduction, and thank you to my colleague panelists for setting the base to this discussion on the historical role of religions in election processes. Dr. Reginald gave us the theoretical framing. George went into some examples of what happens And a lot of what I'll say will probably resonate quite to some extent with what George has said. I'll probably just be like building into what he said. So thank you very much. Let me time myself. I was given 15 minutes to do this. I'll try and keep time. Okay, thank you. So I am dealing specifically with the historical role of religion in elections in Kenya. And I find that religions have historically played a great role in elections and democracy in Kenya, in promoting social cohesion and social change. Right from the pre-independence days, the strongest church then was the AIC, African Inland Church, and they played a great role in resisting colonialism and the run up to independence. But even in these times, you will find that there was a lot of tribalism in the approach of advocating for freedoms. So that in the areas where AIC was predominant, the voices were louder, and those particular ethnic groups found a greater access to power post-independence. So you could see the connection between ethnicity, religion, and democracy at that point. Post-independence, newer churches came up. In the 80s and 90s, we had the NCCK as a very strong group fighting together for change. We had the Kenya Catholic Conference of Bishops as well coming together. But we had the other churches that were still quieters, the SDAs, the AIC, and all those. They were shy to join up with the NCCK, who were seen as political agitators, vis-a-vis the AIC, which was seen as a KANU, pro-KANU religion at that time. So you will see the distinction at that point of NCCK came up, and that's when we had the Gitaris, the Okulus, really speaking out on issues. And this claimer and role of the church actually saw us move to a multi-party democracy. And the first multi-party elections was achieved in 1992 with a great role and impact played by the religions. I think this is part of the reason Fungamano still holds a special spot when it comes to religions, elections, democracy, social cohesion, and all that for Kenyans. It was the role played by religion in setting us to into a multi-party democracy. Now, they achieved at that point the inclusion of Section 2A, but we did not still have a constitution that went hand in hand with a multi-party democracy. So the journey towards a proper multi-party democracy and a new constitution was still continuing. In 2002, when Kibaki was elected, the church was still playing a very strong role. But come 2002, upon the elections of Kibaki and the election of a few religious leaders into parliament, everything took a back burner, a back seat. And you would find that religions then decided to take a more diplomatic approach, a slower approach, and actually shied away from criticizing government. And at this point, I think the religions, historically for Kenya especially, lost the clout that they initially held in terms of being able to dictate the pace of achieving fundamental rights and freedoms for citizens in the claim for us a society that is socially cohesive and that can undergo social transformation. So that's a brief into the historical background in that case. Now, religions have a unique age to play, a unique age and play a very crucial role in promoting social cohesion, social transformation, and in securing human rights, peace, and fundamental freedoms for all. This age is given to them just because of their particular role as religions. Religious leaders and religions are great influencers. You will find people are born into a religion and they abide by what the religion teaches them right from go. Religion is what teaches us right and wrong. Religion is where we build up our set of values and beliefs. And therefore, the religions and religious leaders are great influencers and are trusted by those who ascribe to the particular religions. So trustworthiness, credibility is an age that religions bring into society. And then this gives them, therefore, the greater age to be able to speak up, to be able to take up space and cause change within society. Even political leaders ascribe to religious leaders because they want the blessings to be able to get the clout to move on. So there's a great age and a unique age that religions and religious leaders hold. Religions also work deep in the communities, they work down in the grassroots, and this therefore creates for them strong networks which they can use to access various levels of power, and also gives them an understanding of the local context in the communities, and therefore great legitimacy for what they do. So that age, in my view, should be exploited by religions positively to be able to cause social transformation. In Kenya, I think George has gone through quite a bit of the interventions by religions to try and cause religions actually in election processes. I'll just run through quite a few of them. We know that we have interreligious institutions. We've had a lot of intra-faith connections where we speak openly about what needs to be done for social change, social cohesion to happen. I think one of the strongest results of this is that we have the Muslim faith and the Christian faiths actually working together to try and promote social cohesion and transformation. This is very, very crucial in light of what we have around the Al-Shabaab and all those conflicts that come with that, and the interreligious dialogues and connections have actually built on this. And this actually helps as we move into election processes, because there's a foundation on which religions can speak together against the ills and excesses by politics to be able to have social transformation. We have interventions by the Interreligious Council of Kenya, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, and the NCCK, and their positions on key issues are always well captured and well recorded. Dialogue, mediation are issues that are promoted from grassroots all the way by religions, and this has helped quite a bit post the 2007 violence. In the 2007-2008 violence, the religions let Kenyans down. They were unable to speak as a unit. They spoke on ethnic lines, and this actually propagated ethnic violence in certain areas. George spoke a little about this. And this actually frustrated a lot of issues. So come 2013, it was a time for the religions to rebuild themselves, rebuild their confidence. And they really tried to do this. They held a lot of peace rallies, peace caravans, going out to speak to the people, trying to reclaim their space in elections. And this has been seen in Kenya. They have been now trying to promote a lot of mediation. We've seen a lot of shuttle diplomacy taking place, where we have our religions meeting with the politicians or the politicians of opposite divides. And some of these have led to initiatives like the handshake came out of religious interventions by religions, especially the IRCK. They actually prompted that. Post 2007 again, I think to a small extent, religion played a part in leading to the shared government, Nusu Mkate government that we had. So some of these things happen, but churches or religions also allow themselves to be abused. They allow the churches to be used. And I use churches here very selectively because the Muslims are very careful in who they allow into their space to be able to propagate their political goals. But churches have been seen to permit politics into the space of the church. And this actually causes some conflict to an extent. So you will see that churches have been misused in terms of going back to the 2013 Jubilee Coalition. It was framed. It was framed in religious terms, and the Uhuru Ruto duo were blessed by a lot of churches and deemed as a redemption for Kenya, a jubilee for Kenya. And it was almost like these are the people that will bring repentance, forgiveness, and peace to Kenya. And the church was forefront in this. And I think this was totally unfortunate for the church to allow itself to bring the redemption agenda through to people who probably played a great role. Probably, I use the word probably, a great role in the 2007 issues. So when you see the church allowing themselves to ordain, so for lack of a better word, two people to the crown, and we have a history that has not even been addressed. We have not gone back to open up the wounds of 207 and actually have redemption and mediation across communities. It becomes something that's a thorn in the flesh and actually doesn't speak well for religion. So that's part of our history that you look at and you wonder, where does religion play this kind of negative role at times? The duo were repeatedly blessed by various religions. We had self-dubbed prophet War, also holding a national prayer and bringing all these people and blessing them. And these are instances where the religion has actually played not the role of a bridge, but anyway, yeah, so those are some of the things that we come across. And be that as it may, I think we must say they've been to a great extent peace builders as they go on. We have instances also where religions tell their people not to participate in elections at all, therefore disenfranchising them from the right to choose their destiny, their right to elect leaders of their choice. And this is also something we need to consider when we are talking about religion and elections, the various religions that bar their flock from participating in elections. Then we've also got to deal with the false prophets that we have out there when we talk of religion and elections. We have false prophets telling us they have a prophecy coming to them that Rosalyn will be the next president of Kenya. You know, this is not right. This is something I think as religions we've got to talk about and address as we go into some of those issues with our people. Now, just quickly to look into some of the challenges that religion may face, I think the Christian-Muslim tensions is an issue, especially over the Cadiz Code that was put into the Constitution of Kenya. But these are things that we can overcome, especially as dialogue across the faiths has started. Perceptions of impartiality, I've alluded to that, where churches that's deemed to either be ethnic-oriented or political party-oriented, and these conclaves color their political outlook and comments. Muted debate, preservation of status quo, this is also something that we see quite a bit of. And especially when a particular religion is enjoying favor from the party in power, then they mute debate on certain issues because then it will not be good for them. Fundraising and accepting money that is of dubious sources is also an issue, and George spoke to great extent about that. Now, I will quickly just go into then how can religion engage in curtailing electoral and political violence and promoting social cohesion. I think one of the things we must do is speak with courage against ills, against the human rights violations, against violence, against all these things that go on, and we keep silent. You know, religion is well placed in Kenya because we are secured by the Constitution. Section 32 protects the right and the freedom to religion of choice. So we have a space to speak and speak with courage because we are constitutionally empowered to do so. The survey we have done before is that religions enjoy a lot of clout amongst us. So when we speak as religions, we speak with authority and we speak knowing that the people are with us. We, as religions, they must hold leaders to account and stop being partisan and ask them to tell them the truth when it needs to be told. Empower citizens through civic education, encourage mediation where we can, engage in peace messaging where possible so that all these things get happen. Direct and guide your flock. I mean, this is a biblical order that religion must direct and guide their flock. So let's not shy away and say politics has no space completely in our lives. We are social animals, we are social creatures, and politics is part of this social fabric of our lives. So we must direct and guide our flock on the way to go. We are taught right and wrong right from who in our religions. And so we must continue to speak right and wrong to our flock as we move forward towards the elections. Shuttle diplomacy is a good thing to continue. But one thing I must speak to is mentoring the youth. We all know about criminal gangs. We all know about youth gangs. be misused during times of elections. I think this is one area where religion should step in and help our youth, mentor our youth, and be able to speak and engage in elections as we go forward. Thank you very, very much. I have 18 seconds left. I try to keep time. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for that very informative and very succinct presentation. From Rosalind's presentation, what I think the highlights are that, in fact, religious bodies or religious leaders have played an important role in the political life in Kenya, starting from the sponsoring or the pushing for multi-party elections, which eventually culminated in the new constitution in Kenya. However, like George, she also mentions that, sometimes our religious leaders have been kind of co-opted by political powers. And so this has also played a negative role and a negative perception. Going forward, she really highlights that, sorry, there's a bit of a feedback. So if you are not muted, can you mute? Thank you. So she also highlights that there are some challenges coming up, specifically, to maintain their interreligious dialogue between Christians and Muslims, which is one of the excellent things that is already happening in Kenya. The perception of impartiality, again, linking that to the co-option of religious leaders by political party. And then she also highlights that, going forward, religious leaders need to continue to speak out and educate and participate in the civic education and the preparation of the youth. Now, the forum is open for the plenary session. I am going to see if there's any questions from the floor. Now, at the moment, there's no questions yet from the floor, but there's one question.
Rita, there is a question in the Q&A session and also in the chat box from Matthias.
Okay. Can you help me out with the question, Susan? Because I can't see it. Thank you.
So there's Andreas Cachero is commenting, where there is no legal ground or constitutional role that should be played by religions on the matter of elections, because it is stated in the law and the religion and the state are separate entities. Do we think that decisions made by the electoral board would influence the religious communities, except making simple voices and triggering conflicts? Should we advocate for the state religion in order to avoid any negative effects that comes after the elections in Eastern Africa, because elections have never been democratic and negate the voices of the community at larger extents? So this is a question geared to all of the presenters. So whoever wants to answer this question or these several questions, the floor is yours. You can also read it in the chat box.
Yes, I think I'll just maybe look at two very quick ones. The first one, I think, is coming from Gitonga, who is asking the question, how does the church navigate compromise, especially when leaders join politics? So the question here is, can religion disengage from politics? So there are two perspectives here, that the church is considered to be sacred and politics as the prophet, because they're human. But then this human person is embracing the sacred. Now, when they join politics, what are they playing? What role are they playing? And that's usually the contradiction that we have, that human beings will practice a faith that ascribes to the divine, but then this human person enters politics, but politics is very much about engaging in society. So how do your values that you have acquired from your faith enter politics? And so when people say state and religion should not be entwined, then they're also denying that perspective that when you're a religious leader, you cannot be in politics. So we need to circumvent this space very carefully and say that religion, as Roslyn rightly put it, is helping us to cultivate trustworthiness, to cultivate moral values. So if I'm really a person who believes in my faith and I believe in trustworthiness, then I should bring that in politics. Then the second point also to say is that what is then politics? Politics, who gets what, when, and how? The what of politics is endless. Schools, water, education, just wages, hygiene, health, all these things go with the what of politics. So if you are in religion or a religious leader and cannot articulate trustworthiness or to be morally upright, especially in allocation of resources in education, healthcare, roads, environment, fighting domestic violence, dealing with the trauma, all these things are the what of politics. So there's no way politics can disengage from religion or religion disengage from politics. And very quickly in the second one, I think Adrias brings out a very important perspective of how to look at elections, that sometimes elections in Africa are not democratic. And so the question that I've seen working in Kenya is where the legal fraternity come up with a legal framework of electing. And this legal framework was there in the 2017 elections. And that's why the judges were able to arrive at an electoral decision that explained why the vote of the presidency could not be accepted, that we had to go for a rerun. So a legal framework is very important. Now the question is, how do we define elections? How do you say an election is democratic? Because some countries have delegates. For example, just had election in Somalia where 329 persons elected the president. Is that democratic? But it's how the clan system works. So for their own democratic system, clanism is working. In some countries like China, they also have a delegates kind of democracy where you nominate to elect or you select to elect. So is this democratic? Yet in the Kenya constitution, if you look at Article 1 and 2, we're saying we, the people of Kenya, we can have a direct vote or by representation. So when we cede power to the elected people, is that the same as being democratic? That the few people, the 335 in parliament, will make decisions on behalf of 50 million Kenyans. Is that democratic? Yet, in any democracy, we say it's people rule. It's the people. The power belongs to the people. But we cannot have a crowd ruling. You need to have representation. So these are the questions that we need to ask us all the time when you are relating religion and elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reginald. There is a second question. There's another question which is actually addressed at Rosalind, and is please can you explain why Muslim religious groups or religious leaders have been careful about being politicized? Could you hear the question?
Thank you. Is it in the chat, the question?
Yes. Yes, it is also in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's basically asking how the church can avoid being considered a political outfit?
No, but specifically, during your presentation, you mentioned that the Muslim religious leaders are cautious about being politicized as compared maybe to us Christians. So the question is going to that is why this is and why they're doing it over and out. Thank you.
Okay, that's a hard one to explain because I cannot explain why the Christian churches are more receptive to politics than the Muslim churches, because to be honest, I'm not well conversant with what goes on inside the Islamic temples, mosques, and how they conduct their business. But I think they just have a proper way of conducting their sermons and services to the exclusion of politics. While in our churches, and this comes, I think it comes from the historical perspective for Christianity. When those in power would use the religious institutions to ascend to power further. So they would pretend to be adherents of a certain sect or faith, to be able to be seen to be going to that church every Sunday. And people start associating them with a church, with religion, with Christianity, and the church. And you know, power is like honey to a bee. Power attracts, power galvanizes people towards them. It pulls you in. So even the church leaders became pulled in, and they were attracted to being able to sit next to power every Sunday, being able to sit next to President Moi, let me call a spade, every Sunday, and have all this attention around you. And then also getting the goodies that George talked about. You start getting little goodies here and there. You get a token of land, you get a car tomorrow, you get your church built up. This is how the Christian churches in Kenya, I believe historically, started allowing power to seep into their system and creep in. And therefore people, and people learn fast. Everybody else now who wants power. And let's be honest to ourselves, religions hold a big space in influencing others. Religious leaders are great influencers. What you're told in church is a great influence. So politicians learn quick and fast. Go to church, you have a ready audience, you have a ready crowd, and if the church leader buys your story, you already have a platform for going forward. And part of this also is just greed. It's human nature, greed. Why are people allowing corrupt money into the church? This is something we've spoken about for the last so many years. But we've even had churches coming out and say, we will take that money, we will take that money. So it's human nature, the greed, the need to associate with power and all these things. And I think we need as religions to go back to the basics, the way Matthias said it, what the Jewish teach. Do to others what you would like done to you. Let's be honest with ourselves. Love others as you love yourself. Do right and you will be done for right. I think even our religious leaders somewhere along the way have lost it, and we are losing the goal. So we need to have a renaissance of ourselves. We need to be able to refigure and configure how we carry out religion and our beliefs and belief systems. Because I think somewhere along the way, money has corrupted the church, and the church is losing its way and focus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. Thank you. We have another comment in the chat which says there seems to be a gap coming out in church actions regarding electoral processes. I suggest a plan and to contribute to credibilize elections processes by committing itself in electoral process through election observation before, during, after election. Would any of my panel members care to comment on this, please?
Yes. Let me make two comments. The first one is that the church has been very active in civic education, and especially in the 1980s, educating people why we need better electoral processes, why we need credible leaders, why we need to change the constitution. And the church the churches or the faith leaders in Kenya have been behind the new constitution of Kenya, especially the Ufungamano initiatives. But what does that mean? It means that for people to understand their role in electing credible leaders, they have to go through a series of education. So civic education was very strong in the 1980s and 90s. But then with the time, today, when you talk about civic education, it's always equivalent to being opposed to the government. If you talk of civic education, for example, people with disability to have a voice, then the system or the government will look at you as a rebel, somebody who is propagating, almost like you are a terrorist. So there have been blackmailing of persons who want to bring civic education. But we can go back and recapture what was there in the 1980s, where the churches became centers of civic education. Now, the problem, of course, is, as Roslyn has put it, that in churches, they can also be turned into political rallies instead of addressing real issues that connect with humanity. When you talk about trustworthiness, and then you're not able to articulate that in civic education, then what are you saying? What about when we are talking about the church as the conscience of society? You know, the church is there to cultivate moral values. Like Kenyatta, 1963 says, the church is the moral conscious society. Kibaki speaking 1971 at Autocratic Center in Gong, the church is the conscious society. So the church had been given that mandate. But then, how do you separate yourself from being embraced by the system while at the same time critiquing what the system is doing? And that's why Gitari was very careful when he says, keeping a critical distance helps you to critique the system. Don't be swallowed. Don't become a commissioner. Don't join a particular body to adjudicate over the government issues. So civic education should help us cultivate good moral values. And very lastly, that because some churches are very poor and they're looking for money, they tend to be very much connected to the politicians. So again, here we're warned about practicing politics of neo-patrimonialism. We are moving into the world where we are pocketed by politicians. One side we want to criticize, one side wanted to build for us a school, a hospital, a college. Yet the new constitution is very clear that that's the role of the counties. So if you're going to have counties building hospitals, schools, and all that, what do church leaders need to do? There has to be another role they can play without practicing politics on your patrimonialism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reginald. Susan, do you see any other questions on the chat? Anyway, while Susan is helping me out with the questions on the chat, maybe I would like to direct a question to my panel members, and that is how are the churches and the religious leaders preparing for this new election? I know that civil society organizations are meeting and targeting the youth, politicians, and even the religious leaders to make sure that this election is peaceful and fair. But how are we going with our religious leaders in the preparations for the up and coming elections? Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the Catholic Church, we talk about Lenten campaign for this year was intended to prepare the Kenyans for the upcoming election. What are we all looking for? One, we need the right leaders who understand the problem and are willing to work with us. We are looking for leaders who are going to stem out corruption and this is what you're looking at, and then the future of this country is on the youth. Youth are very, very critical stakeholders. And if you don't plan for them, what is going to happen? That's basically what we need to do. But the church needs to do a little bit more of advocacy, which had gone down from 2017 when the government stopped advocacy activities. I don't know what is going on now, but I hope that part is going to be unlocked and allow the freedom for the churches to be able to advocate and do civic education to educate the society on how to make the choices. Thank you.
If I could just add a little bit to that. Thank you very much, George. I've worked very closely with the religious leaders, the IRCK, and KCCB, and we have a very robust civic education process going on. We developed a manual which is being used to carry out civic education across the country. It has been agreed by the religious leaders that there shall be no politics on their pulpits. And I think for the mainstream religions, this has been agreed. The religions are also engaging duty bearers. They have had sessions with the NCIC, the IEBC, they've had sessions with Parliament. So they are engaging duty bearers and even the NPS to be ensure that we have more cohesion, we have more peace, and no lives are lost this year, and a lot of issues are going into this. They have trained their clergy on mediation processes so that they're able to engage communities in matters of social cohesion and peace, and that is also going on. Then we have a project with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is collaborating with the religions in an initiative we call the Mulika Initiative, where we are carrying out monitoring and observation, and that's already going on right now. We get timely data on where the hotspots, where we find the hotspots, we immediately notify other duty bearers like the security agencies or the IBC where there are violations of the code of conduct. And so all these are initiatives under religions for the next elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosalind, for that very detailed answer. I noticed we have another question in the question and answer section. And the question is, do you think religious leaders themselves have at times invited and later supported violence? I think, Rosalind, you touched on this issue in your presentation. So would you like to start, and maybe after the other colleagues can add? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Literature and reports developed after the 2007-2008 elections specifically pointed fingers as religions for having fueled violence during that time. We have allegations of particular clerics who actually went out and told their people, arm yourselves because now this is a war against us, and this happens. And when we look at our Muslim brothers as well, they also sometimes come up and talk of the jihad when people are threatened, and that also fuels violence, not because they are preaching violence, so to speak, but the interpretation that is perceived by the flock receiving the message is that this is a call to violence. This is a call to arm ourselves. So we have seen these instances, they continue to arise. And these are some of the things, indices we are actually monitoring in these elections to be able to see whether religious leaders will also be playing a part in fueling fires or in just calming the fires. But this is documented, especially post 2007-2008. Thank you.
Thank you very much. George, Dr. Reginald, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I think the election campaign theme this year was unity in diversity, promoting good neighborliness. And that also goes to religious leaders, that when they stand at the pulpit, they're supposed to bring people together, unity for the right purpose. And so they cannot preach violence in the churches or show that Kenyans should be divided along religious lines, or nor think that their religion is the only one that should matter when electing leaders. And this is where now the separation is very, very important, that we should not use our religion to segregate, because we want to promote this good neighborliness. And so choosing the right language is very, very important. And I've also seen where there have been violence, where churches have been torched, but then the religious leaders come together, both from the Islamic faith and Christian faith, working together and promoting peace. And that's why in Tangaza, we have interreligious dialogue and Islamic studies, where religions come together to promote this good neighborliness. And also in Tangaza, we have a program where we reach out to members of parliament. Every Wednesday, we have sessions with members of parliament to cultivate this positiveness of being one Kenya, one people, and people who adhere to their religious values without necessarily segregating or bringing division among people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reginald. We have one more question in the chat that I see. The question is, you mentioned the importance of inclusive elections in different ways through advocacy, civic education. How can we ensure that youth are seen and heard as agents of change? I think this was a topic that you touched on very lightly from Dr. Reginald and George. So maybe can you enlighten us, please? Dr. Reginald? George?
Yes, I think it's a very important question where the youth become agents of change. We just had, last Saturday, we have a civic education, can call it also advocacy in Tangaza, where we started engaging the youth in Kenya towards peaceful elections. And some of the challenges the youth go through, unemployment, not being heard, not being given opportunity to lead. The youth have been told you're the leaders of tomorrow, but when will this tomorrow come? When you're 80 years or 100 years? So we are saying today, you are the leaders, you are the change makers, you are the transformers. Take the reins of power, take control of your own state. Come out and speak loudly about your issues. And so if the youth are well modeled and understand their value in society, they are the change makers. If the youth are not gullible to the machinations and the corruption of politicians, they are the change makers. If youth understand that the people you are electing are supposed to be the role models who should bring about the desired change in their lives, then they are the change makers. If the youth understand that they have the power to bring to office persons who can talk about education, development, embracing technology, social entrepreneurship, bring about sustainable development, reaching out to the aspirations of life to achieve their dreams, then these are the change makers. What is happening today is that the youth are separated from the real change agents, and therefore they're very frustrated, and they can easily be lured into violence. When we're doing some research about just 3 years ago, and I'm very happy that we have been able to work with the Kamkunji Community Peace Network, where the Muslim groups are Riyadh Mosque, the Christian groups in Isli, Pumwani area, are working together to help the youth find the path to purpose, the path to purpose of life. And here, the youth who have been feeling that they should join terror movements, now they're moving into technical training, learning ICT, creating jobs, becoming artists, becoming carpenters. And we in Tangaza are involved with this kind of young people to give them hope, because we know that they're right change agents. Thank you.
Can I make a comment on that? Thank you very much. The part of the problem we have with the youth, our political leaders are self-centered and interested in power By being there, they hold the power on the decisions or on the resource allocation. That's part of the reason why our civic education cannot move on. And the target for civic education, to me, should be the youth, training them and sharing with them how to make informed decisions, particularly during the political electoral process. And by keeping them backwards, we are just saying you have no opportunity of coming to position where we are. So they remain where they are. Those old guys remain where they are, and therefore the status quo. But transformation will only come if we get to a point we allow ourselves to inform the youth through civic education how they can be able to move forward, apart from telling them about education or training, but giving them opportunities in the political system. Until we get them into that political system as a majority, we will not be able to get them to bring the change we desire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have another question which I will address to all panel members who wish to reply. The question is, ethnic-based election campaigns have been common practices, and the losers at the end would complete their campaigns with violent conflict. How should we overcome a challenge such as this? I'll leave this question open to any panel member who wishes to answer. Thank you.
Yes, I think I'll go first, if it's okay. Ethnic-based election campaigns are common practices. These are phenomena across Africa, and sometimes we do not know how to disengage from this because ethnic groups are looking in a share in the national cake. And then there is this famous phrase in Africa where you hear, what is there for us? If you do this for me, then this is for you. So the art of negotiation before elections comes in, fronting candidates who can promote their interests are there, candidates who can be able to harness resources to the ethnic community are there, and you can even go up to the presidential candidates. And we don't need to look very far how we pick presidential candidates. We don't look at it that there are people who stand out nationally who can lead, but you're looking at from an ethnic group who can be the right person to go and negotiate space for us to enjoy this national cake. But then when you look at the situation in a country like Kenya, where we have 47 counties, we should be looking at what is there that the counties can do to promote good neighborliness, development in all aspects at the county level. Then when you go to the counties, we also find clan problems or challenges where the big clans tend to control the resources of the county. Then the sub-clans are a disadvantage. I think we need to come up with a mechanism where we say we're electing leaders who are going to serve the interests of everyone, irrespective whether you come from small clan, small group of people, or you come from a small ethnic group, but then all of them that can share in the national cake. So ethnic-based elections, campaigns, can lead to violence when people think that they're disadvantaged in the election of their leaders. And we don't need to look very far. The situation in Kenya currently, this is where we are now, and everybody is trying to push their own candidate to bring, who can negotiate resources for their own ethnic groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, George.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Please.
thank you. Thank you, George. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Now, I was just thinking that, yes, we are ethnic-based, ethnic inclined, and probably it is time to rethink our democracy. Should we change the way we vote and elect? Should we go the electoral college way? These are conversations that are still open because we are highly we are highly polarized along ethnic lines, and this is something the politicians really know how to cultivate and build. So we probably need to go beyond that and find, is there something we need to rethink? Is it our democracy? Is it the way we elect our leaders? These are some of the conversations we need to have going forward, especially looking at how the DPs, the deputy presidents, were nominated. It was all balkanization and saying who brings the most votes to the table, and we need to secure that vote. So indeed, we are ethnicized. Indeed, we are divided along those lines. Numbers will continue to dictate which tribes in Kenya continue to control us. So we have to think, how do we become inclusive as a people? How do we embrace everyone? How do we make sure that democracy works for all and not just 3, 4, 5 ethnic groups? So my input would be, let's rethink our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. George.
Thank you very much. My take on this is that we have a policy gap. As Roslyn says, we need to rethink, and that rethinking should take us back to the policy structure, how we have set up our democracy, because I think that we have allowed ethnicity all the way for a long time, and we need to get back to a unified nation, and that can only come from the change of the constitution. And we also need to direct how the resources are going to be used, because when we have the 47 counties and we have given all the resources, you find the development in the counties are totally uniform. Some counties are developed better than the others, and you move from one county, you have a lot of tarmac roads for today, yet you go to the next county, there is no new tarmac road that has been developed. So there's no uniformity in our development, because part of this I see as a policy gap. Thank you.
Thank you, George. We have another question on the chat. This question, I think I will direct to Rosalind, which is focused on gender. The question goes like this: the navigation of gender issues, how does the church respond to the same, yet the church seems weak in gender inequality, the moral authority question. So as I understand, the question is, how does the church address gender, where maybe this also is a weakness within the church? Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Gitonga, for that question. Last December, we did a survey on gender and the church, and very interesting returns came out. And the issue of the space for women within churches is still a thorny issue that keeps creeping in and back. But I must say there is progress in terms of certain churches that are now ordaining women as bishops and to senior positions. So we've seen change in that regard. And I think there is progress in terms of the church and a willingness to open up and discuss these issues now. So we should not vilify the church in a totality. There is already engagement and discussions going on, and baby steps, I'm sure the churches will get to where they want to be. And the fact that women are not at the top doesn't mean the church does not respect gender. We've got to appreciate that the church respects gender, but the church also has structures within and canons of belief that they work with. So we cannot push certain issues that are not part of our belief systems as a faith or as a grouping, but they respect gender. I will not say there's disrespect for women within religions. I don't think that would be a correct statement. But when it comes to issues of pushing for gender at national level, because this is a constitutional provision that has been provided and that we have ascribed to as Kenyans, when the church talks about it, they're not talking as a church for themselves, they're talking on behalf of Kenyans who have given them the moral authority to speak for people on behalf of the church for the good of Kenyans. I told you one of the roles of the church is to build social cohesion and social transformation. And this is one of their duties. They cannot be selective and say, we will not advocate this right that is provided in the Constitution. So no matter their internal structures, I think they have the moral authority given to them under Section 32 with the right to have opinion and belief, to speak out when the government is falling short on its obligations that it's constitutionally mandated to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Electoral.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we also have to be very careful how we define gender today, especially in the church. How do you define gender? Is it just male and female, transsexual, bisexual, polysexual, you know? And then I was also surprised when we were discussing this two-third gender rule, and then people are saying, why don't we introduce it in the church? That when you have a women association, the two-third gender rule should be there. And then we say, no, we have to be very careful how we circumvent this discussion. Not everything can be put in one pot and then we say, now we have gender equality. No, everything needs to be discussed on its own merit and its own understanding. My study in UK taught me a lot of lessons that women were agitating to be ordained priests and bishops. That is okay. So you're given an office, but without power. Then what's the point of then circumventing this stage or walking into this space when we're fighting for rights and positions of women in the church, but then they don't have power? So it has to be holistic, how we define gender, how we look at it, and how we articulate issues, that we know our roles very clearly, and that we don't pollute what is already existing that is good, but then at the same time, walk into the path of transforming areas that bring women to a lower status. That is how I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think at the moment there are no other questions. So what we're looking to do is to wrap up this session. Before we wrap it up, I would like to just maybe summarize some of the highlights that I have taken from this meeting. I think the first and most important one is that religious bodies and religious organizations are part of our community, and they do have a role to play in political issues, especially in terms of speaking out for communities, guiding communities, and ensuring that political leaders maintain the ethos of being of service to their communities. However, like everything else, religious bodies are human, so they are also apt to be corrupted by power and be influenced by such power. So this is something to be guarded against. In Kenya, there are great steps being taken because there are interreligious discussions which are really quite highly involved and actually contribute a lot to peace and stability. We see the gap of this when, for some reason, the religious bodies will disengage, as we've seen maybe in 2007 and 2008 elections. Going forward, I think there's a lot of optimism looking forward to the next elections in Kenya. Having concluded this way, I'll ask Susan to step in for some concluding remarks and the guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for this wonderful summary. I think that captured the main takeaways for this session. So I just wanted to thank our speakers for today. So Matthias Eder, Dr. Reginald Nalugala, George Oyeho, and Rosalind Odede for the fruitful inputs. I think there's so much food for thought. So I think So that's all for the first session. So we will continue the TACSPA conference at 2 p.m. I'm talking about religion, ethnicity, and polarization around elections. So we are looking forward to see you there to discuss about this issue. And I would like to ask you to participate in our really small survey, because we can only improve when we can learn from you as well. So just take like 2 or 3 minutes. You can either go via the link I've posted in the chat, or just use the QR code with your smartphones. Yeah, so I think that's all from my side. Thank you very much, Rita, for the moderation. And then we see each other at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.